We are now going to talk about accommodation. Now, this is a popular topic that pops up quite often. It's very simple, and you'll see I'll also use it quite often when I'm explaining things. Residential accommodation and commercial accommodation. Now, first we're going to talk about what is a couple of definitions. I don't want you guys to necessarily worry about it too much, and just to substantiate it from the Act. So the first thing I want you to understand is what is a dwelling. A dwelling, Section 1 of the Act says, means except where it is used in the supply of commercial accommodation. Right, so except, so I'm going to just say here, does not apply to commercial accommodation. That is what that first bit in the yellow says, except where it's used in the supply for commercial accommodation. So we're trying to say not commercial accommodation. So dwelling means any building, premises, structure, or any other place or any part thereof used predominantly as a place of residence or abode of any natural person, or which is intended for use predominantly as a place of residence or abode of any natural person, including fixtures and fittings belonging thereto and enjoyed therewith. So what they are saying is, they're saying if you're a natural person, a dwelling is the place that you use as a residence. So in other words, it is the place which is used as a home by a natural person. Now, understand now, guys, if the place at the end of the day, when you go home, when you're done studying, when you're done at work, when you go home, that's your home. If you go and stay in a hotel, yes, you're going to go to the hotel room to sleep, but that's not your home. So this is really your home, your house. So it's something in court that you'll have to prove, but it's quite clear usually from the facts, do you call this a home or not? Alright, so Section 12C then says, residential accommodation is exempt. In other words, there's no output tax, there's no input tax. So what is residential accommodation? What does Section 12C tell us? It says, the supply of a dwelling, remember guys, we just discussed what a dwelling is. A dwelling is a place a natural person uses as a home. So if you supply, rent out, sell a dwelling on an agreement for the letting and hiring thereof, that will be residential accommodation. So if you are renting a flat from someone, they cannot charge you VAT on it. It is exempt from VAT. They can't claim input VAT. It's exempt. Right, that's the first one. Or the supply of lodging and board by the employer of the recipient, where the recipient is entitled to occupy the accommodation as a benefit of his office. Or by the employer of the recipient, where the employer operates a hostel, which is mainly for the benefit of the employees, other than for the purpose of making a profit. So they say, so there's two big situations. The first one is, if someone gives you a dwelling, which you can rent from them, hire from them, so you rent a flat from somewhere, it's exempt. The second one is, if your employer gives you a place to stay, whether or not it's for making a profit or not, it is exempt. So an employer cannot claim anything relating to residential accommodation it gives its employees. Right, what is commercial accommodation then? So commercial accommodation, I'm going to make a comment, this is a taxable supply. In other words, i.e., it is not exempt. So commercial accommodation is taxable, residential is exempt. What is commercial accommodation? It says it means lodging or board together with domestic goods and services. That's important. So they say together with the services, I'll explain in a second, in any house, flat, apartment, room, hotel, motel, inn, guest house, boarding house, residential establishment, holiday accommodation unit, chalet, tent, caravan, camping site, houseboat, or similar establishment which is regularly or systematically supplied, but excluding a dwelling in terms of the agreement for the letting and hiring thereof. Okay, so what is commercial accommodation? It says it is if you give a person a place to stay together with services. So for example, if you go and stay in a hotel and there's someone that brings you room service, or they come and clean your room, that's a service. That is part of the commercial accommodation. They say then it doesn't matter if it's a house, a flat, an apartment, a room, a hotel, a motel, etc. A caravan, whatever. that is commercial accommodation. So there's VAT on it. But they tell you it excludes a dwelling in terms of the agreement and letting the hiring thereof. So what are they saying? Remember, we looked at a dwelling and we saw under residential accommodation, when they give you a dwelling for letting and hiring, it is residential accommodation. So they're trying to say commercial accommodation is not residential accommodation. That's all they're trying to say there. Can you see? Then, what else? Lodging or board in a home for the aged, children, physically or mentally handicapped persons. So if you have an old age home or a hospice or something like that, which is the next one, that's commercial accommodation. There is VAT on it. Right, there is VAT on it. Very, very, very important. Now, I'm just reminding you, remember in section 1, we looked at the definition of an enterprise. Now, I'm going to remind you, what does section 7.1a say? It says you must charge VAT if there's a supply, there's goods, there's services, there's a vendor, and there's an enterprise. This is obviously all just now a quick little revision for you guys. Remember, very important. So, there must be an enterprise. Now, in the definition of an enterprise in section 1, they tell you commercial accommodation is not an enterprise if it is less than 120,000 rands per year. So, if you have commercial accommodation which is less than 120,000 rands a year, it is not an enterprise, so there will be no output tax or input tax. But if it's more than 120,000 rands, it is an enterprise, and therefore you must register as VAT. So what are they trying to say? They say, if I've now started opening a bed and breakfast, and it's making 100,000 rands a year, so it's a small little business, I don't have to register for VAT. I'm not carrying on an enterprise. I'm not going to worry about it. But the moment it's more than 120,000 rands a year, then I must register for it. Now, we're still talking about commercial accommodation. Remember when we looked at commercial accommodation, it said here at the top, let me just clean it up for you. It says it means lodging and board together with domestic goods and services. So what are those domestic goods and services? So in other words, these things are all considered commercial accommodation, which means they're all subject to VAT. What are they? They're defined in section 1. It says it is the goods and services provided in supplying commercial accommodation. It includes cleaning and maintenance. So they must charge you VAT if they clean your room. Electricity, gas, air conditioning and heating. If they charge you for it, they must charge VAT. Telephone, furniture, meals, laundry, nursing services, water. If they charge you for that, if you're staying in a hospital, you're staying in a hotel, you're staying in a camping site, they charge you for those things, you must pay VAT on it. They must pay VAT, and you can obviously claim it if it's part of your business for whatever reason. Right, then, special rule, section 10.10. Remember section 10 is our value rule, our value section. Section 10.10 says, here's a special rule, it says, if you give someone commercial accommodation and you charge with these goods and services, and they are staying for more, must be more than 28 days, so 29 days, 30 days, etc., then you only charge VAT on 60% of the charge. So, let's say, hotel room cost per day is 1,000 rands ex VAT. If person stays 20 days, this is just an example now, what is the output tax? It will be 1,000 times 20 days times 15%. Right? So the VAT will be 3,000 rands. So the invoice that the hotel will give will say room charge 20,000, VAT 3,000, total, so this is ex VAT, the total including VAT is then 23. Okay, now if that is instead of 20 days, let's make it 30 days. So it is more than 28 days. If that happens, pay attention to what happens here now. It's 1,000 times 30 days times 60%. Make sure that you see that, times 15%. So there's a discount on it. Now guys, the reason for this is because if you go and stay in things like a hospice or a hospital, that's commercial accommodation, but this is just a way of then giving a little bit of relief. So that makes it 2,700. Right, so you can see the VAT is then decreased. It's only on 60% of the value. So guys, here's just a summary of what we said. Residential accommodation is exempt, no input tax, no output tax. Commercial accommodation, normal VAT, there's a special rule. Right, so remember, for discussion again, you need to be able to discuss the timing, the value, special rules. That's why you'll see it. And also look at lecture example number 7.